Pirkei Mishnah Hey. The Tana in Avot, Pirkei Mishnah Hey, says as follows: Hu haya omer, ein bur yerechet, v'loy ama oretz chosid, v'loy habayshon lomet, v'loy hakapton melamet, v'loy chol amarbe b'schoyer machkim, of a moka, of a mekoim shein anoshim, hishtadol liyosish. The Tana says that not everybody who goes and engages in business, he has business dealings, if he is very involved in business and parnasa, it's not necessarily going to be a Talmud Chacham. If he's so preoccupied in business, he's not likely to be a Talmud Chacham. Of a Malkam Shein Anoshim, where there's no Anoshim, then you have to put an effort to rise above and become an Ish. You have to be an Ish, a leader. What is the connection between these two? Explains the Bar Tanura that in a place where people are engaged in Parnasa, we have merchants, businessmen, etc., and it's not common to find Talmidei Chachamim, and not likely to find Talmidei Chachamim. Then you have to step up. Then you have to step up and conduct yourself in a position of leadership and authority as a Talmid Chacham. If you're in a place where there are Talmidei Chachamim, there are other Talmidei Chachamim, there are other people who could be Meir Hara, there are other people who could be leaders and offer guidance and be Rabbonim, and the Talmidei Chachamim of the city, and then you can continue your Avodas Hashem in private. But where it's a place where people are marbe, b'schaira, and you don't have Talmidei Chachamim who can assume the leadership, the mantle of leadership for this city, then hishtada liyosish, you have to step up. Then you are not nechbal kelim, you step up, you're not so tzanua, you have to step up and assume the mantle of leadership. But perhaps we can offer a somewhat different interpretation based on a pshat of the Medrash Shmuel. The Medrash Shmuel is medayik in the lashon of the Mishnah. It says, Ein bur yerechet. A bur is not a yerechet. It's unequivocal. He's not. V'lo yamar et chosid. Also, it's definite, definitive, unequivocal. V'lo yamar et chosid. He's not a chosid. V'lo bashan lomed. V'lo kaptan melamed. V'lo now here the lashon is different. It doesn't say loy hamarbe b'schoyer machim. It says loy chol hamarbe b'schoyer machim. In the other cases, it's very definite, very clear cut, very unequivocal. A bur is not a yerechet, an amaretz is not a chalset, etc. But here it says v'loy chol hamarbe b'schoyer machim. Not all the people who are marbe b'schoyer machim, which is mashma. It's not necessarily so. It's not always the case. But sometimes you in fact do find someone who is marbe b'schoyer, who is machkim. You cannot be an amarz, cannot be a chosid. It cannot be. Now generally speaking, a person who's marbe b'schoyer is not going to be a Talmid Chacham, but it's possible. It is possible. That's why the Tana says, "V'loy chol hamarbe b'schoyer machim." Not everyone who is marbe b'schoyer is machim, becomes a Talmid Chacham, but some are, and it is possible. Like the Medrash Shmuel says, we find by Ilfa that Ilfa went to engage in schoira, and he was machim, and we find other Tanoim, Amoraim, Rishonim, etc., that were engaged in parnasa, and they were great Talmidei Chachamim. Now, based on that, maybe, perhaps, we can offer the following pshat. Lo yechol amar b'schoyer machkim. Not everybody who is marbe b'schoyer can be machkim b'talmid chacham, but there are those who are. There are those who can provide leadership, both in terms of being a talmid chacham and leadership in the general affairs of the tzibur. When there is no ish, ish meaning, the phrase ish like Ish Hashkoilis, Ish Adonai Haaretz. Yosef was referred to as Ish Adonai Haaretz. He was the one who was the leader. He was the viceroy. He sustained the world, the civilization in the time of the famine. He was the Ish Adonai Haaretz. Ish HaEshkoilis, the Ish who has all of these attributes, who is a Talmid Chacham and a community leader, and can sustain the people, and can provide leadership and support and direction in other facets, in other areas, aside from being Limud Torah, but in other areas as well, in the direction and the community needs of the city. B'makom she'ein ish, ishtadel liyos ish. B'd'rna noshim, b'makom she'esh noshim, when there are other leaders and community leaders and people who are supporting the city and people who are providing direction and people who are taking care of the community needs, the communal needs, then you don't have to be an ish. You can remain with your limud Torah without diverting your attention. But b'makom she'ein anoshim, where we don't, in a place where you don't have other leaders, community leaders, people who can take care of the needs of the city, then hishtadl, make hishtadlos, and to be an ish, even if it means somewhat sacrificing from your learning of Torah, but b'makom she'ein anoshim, when there's no brayer, there's no choice, hishtadl, then you have to make an hishtadlos to be an ish. In Toronto, we're zeicha to have one of the Rabbanim in the city, Rabbi Dovid Shlita. We're zeicha to have one of the Hashavua Rabbanim, who is the son of Rav Avram Pam, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So one time, and many years ago, I asked Rav Dovid, I asked him, what was it growing up? What was it like growing up in your house? At that time, Rav Avram Pam was the Gadol in America. He was the leader and provided direction. He took off so much of his time to deal with personal problems that people had, shilas that people had, all kinds of community klal work, speaking at different occasions, traveling, organizing and part of different events and fundraising events and tzorchei tzibur. He was overwhelmed with so many of the needs of Klal Yisrael, both in America, around the world, in Eretz Yisrael. What was it like growing up in a house like that? You must have people coming and going and phone calls, etc. And how many were you able to have quiet time with your father? Rabbi Dovid Shlita said the following. He said, no, on the contrary. We were growing up, the house was kulei Torah and limud Torah and teaching Torah. There was none of this at all involved. It was a peaceful house and totally devoted to limud and the harbatzos of Torah. He said, my father only started being involved, engaged in klal work when he was in his 60s. Up until that time, he wasn't involved at all. He was totally involved in his learning and his teaching. B'makom she'ein anoshim yishtadel liyos. When there were other gedolim to bear the mantle of leadership, Rapam was learning and teaching Torah and didn't divert his attention. But the time came where Klal Yisrael looked to him to be a gadol. They looked to him to help give direction, help support, help with fundraising, supporting moistus with yechidim. And then he stepped up and assumed the mantle of leadership, even at the expense of his own learning. Another Maisa comes to mind, which was told to me by Rav Simcha Wasserman Zatzal. This involved Rav Aaron Kotler, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He said it was during the war years. During the war years, the terrible war years, World War II, when Klal Yisrael was suffering, when there were so many trapped in Europe and trapped in the camps, and there were refugees. So Rav Aaron took off from his learning, took off from his time, and was busy trying to get the committee together and raise money to save the Yidden from the fiery furnace of the terrible Holocaust, and to try to be pay to them, pidyon shvuyim, and to do whatever was possible to save them. So he went around to the various rabbonim in America, to the various leaders, tried to join them, get them to help fundraise, speak to their communities, speak to their kehillas, and galvanize the support from rabbonim and leaders all around the country. So one time he approached a certain rabbi, a certain Rav, who was known as a gewaltige Talmid Chacham, a major Talmid Chacham. But he was not involved in community affairs very much. He had a small kehillah, and he was learning, and he was devoted to his limud HaTorah. Rav Aaron approached him and said, I need your help. I need your help to speak to the people, to help raise money, to help save the Yidden who are trapped in this Gehenna of the Holocaust. So this Rav said to Rav Aaron, he said, I'm busy learning Torah Yom V'Layla. There are many leaders, rabbis who are not. Speak to them. They should be ones. They're not learning day and night anyway. Speak to them. Let them help. I'm learning Torah Yom V'Layla. Godol Talmud Torah Yoser Ma'atzolos Nefoshes. Torah Talmud Torah is greater than Atzolos Nefoshes, and I'm learning Torah Yom V'Layla. So let me continue learning my Torah, and there are others who should go and help with this cause. But Godol Talmud Torah Yoser Ma'atzolos Nefoshes. Rav Aaron answered him and he says, correct. You're right. Godol Talmud Torah Yoser Ma'atzolos Nefoshes. And therefore, if you're given the choice, if you have the choice, then choose Talmud Torah. It's greater. However, at this point in time, you are not been given a choice. Nobody's asking you. You don't have a choice. If you have a choice, choose Talmud Torah. But the Torah is saying when it comes to Al Dam Reyacha, you don't have a choice anymore. You don't have the choice. You have to step up. Even it means sacrificing your Torah, because the Torah says, Leisam Al Dam Reyacha. Torah is not giving you a choice. There are times in life when we have a choice. When we have a choice, the greatest thing is Talmud Torah. Sometimes we don't have a choice. B'mokam she'ein ish hishtadel liyos ish. When there's a place when there are no anoshim, b'mokam she'ein anoshim.